Hey guys, Tommy with Elevation every weekend here. For this week's video, just want to do something a little bit different, something I think is kind of fun, which is to take these three bikes, my three fat bikes, my 2014 Surly Pugsley, the 2020 Surly ice cream truck, and the 2021 Salsa Beargrease, and run all three bikes on two timed lap sections of trail that I run all the time, and just to see how they compare. The section of trail, it's close by to me. It's near a reservoir that I go, especially during the week, I go ride it all the time because it's close by. And after work, I have plenty of time to go over there and ride. It's all dirt, so there's some double track trail sections around the reservoir, and then it goes right into some dirt roads in Boulder County that get up into the foothills a little bit. I ride it all the time, and the two sections of trail that I'm going to do are, I've ridden probably hundreds of times in the last few years. So the one section is a little under 5 miles, and it's basically just a loop. And then the other section is kind of an out and back. It's a little over 5 miles, probably almost 5.5 miles. Just an out and back, but it does kick up towards the end with a climb. So it'll get a little bit of a climbing cadence in there, and also the descending. So I figure between those two sections of trail, I should be able to get a good comparison on these three bikes. Now, this is more for fun and just to see what happens. It's not what I would consider scientific, just because I'm not going to use a power meter, so I'm not going to be able to control my cadence or try to maintain a certain watt output, which would be ideal to try to at least make it a little more repeatable as far as the results. But because I do ride them all the time, these two loops, I do have a good feel for them and feel like going the way I usually ride them, which is usually for a workout, I usually ride them at a pretty high tempo, high pace. If I go kind of all out on all three bikes, I should get a pretty fair comparison. The other thing I can't control is the weather, so that'll be another factor. I'm going to attempt to do each one about the same time on 3 consecutive mornings. Hopefully the conditions will end up being comparable, but again, it's just something I can't control, so we'll just have to see how that plays out. So just to give you a quick rundown of each of the three bikes, I just wanted to give real basic details on what each bike is, and a couple of pros and cons ahead of this that I see for each bike. The first bike is my 2014 Surly Pugsley. It has 26-inch wheels, and I recently, if you saw my last video, upgraded the tires. I put some lighter weight Surly tubes in, and I put 4.3-inch Edna tires on it, which were actually a significant improvement over the stock tubes and tires that were on the bike. And it really has, it took about 2 pounds off the bike and really has livened up how it feels, and the rolling resistance is much improved. This bike also has a 2x9 drivetrain. So it definitely has a gear advantage because it has a 36-tooth front chainring. The small cog is 11-tooth in the back. So it definitely has more gear than the other two bikes, and it is a steel frame bike, obviously being a Surly Pugsley. All the Surly bikes are steel frame. The second bike is my 2020 Surly ice cream truck, obviously also still steel frame. It also has 26-inch wheels. It has the biggest width tires of the bunch at 4.8-inch with the stock Bud and Lou tires. They are very aggressive tires too, so it'll be interesting to see how it does compared to the other two. The gearing is a 1x12 SLX. It has a 30-tooth front chainring and a 10-tooth rear cog in the back. Not as much gear as the Pugsley, but it actually has a little more gear than the next bike in the bunch, which is my 2021 Salsa Beargrease. This bike is carbon, so it's full carbon fiber bike. It is considered a race bike. It has 27.5-inch wheels and 4-inch wide tires, so smallest width, but bigger wheels and bigger tires, and the overall diameter, it does give it more mass. These are the 45 North Vanhelgas. They are very aggressive tires. Rolling resistance isn't the greatest on these tires, but again, that's not really what they're designed for. They're more of a max traction tire. This bike has a 1x11 Deore drivetrain. It is also 30-tooth chainring in the front, but the small cog in the back is 11-tooth, so it has the least gear for top speed of the bunch. First up, I'm just going to go over a few of the pros and cons of each of the bikes, at least hypothetically, at least as I see just looking at them. First up will be the 2014 Pugsley. It's the second lightest of the group at 34 pounds. A couple of the pros I see is even though this is the only bike not set up tubeless, which would be a con, because the tires, the tubes are fairly lightweight, because the tires are the lightest weight of the three and the best rolling of the three. I actually think that it's probably going to not be a huge detriment that it's not set up tubeless. I think the overall rolling resistance is going to be better, and the weight, the rolling weight is actually not going to be a big detriment between the three bikes. After making the change, I definitely can tell that they really livened the bike up. Probably the biggest advantage of this bike is going to be the gearing. So it has the most top speed gearing of the three, and that's probably going to be at least some advantage. Be curious to see how much of an advantage. Next up, just talking about the 2020 ice cream truck real quick. It is actually the heaviest of the three bikes. It comes in right around 35 pounds, so only about a pound heavier than the Pugsley. So the static weight isn't a huge factor per se, but I do think that the tires being more aggressive, the widest width at 4.8 inches, and they could be the heaviest. Even though it is set up tubeless, it could still be the heaviest tire wheel combination of the bunch. I think that the rolling resistance is probably going to be a factor for that bike. It does have the second best gearing. Again, heaviest bike with the biggest tires, most rubber on the road. Might be a detriment, but it does have a gearing advantage over the third bike, which is going to be the Salsa Beargrease. Now, this is the most different of the three because it is a full carbon fiber bike. It is by far the lightest of the bunch. It's about 31 pounds as ridden. It also has the most different wheel and tire set of the bunch too, in that it's a 27.5 inch wheel. Even though they're narrower, because they are larger wheels, the contact patch is still bigger, which is generally a good thing for traction and flotation in snow and things like that. But if you're just purely talking rolling resistance, it probably loses some ground with the bigger wheel and tire combination on the rolling resistance side, at least with these tires on, which are more aggressive. On the upside is this bike does pedal the best of the three bikes by far. Being carbon fiber, it is super responsive. You really feel like is extremely efficient in the pedaling. So that's a big benefit for that bike. So the weight and the pedaling efficiency are probably the two biggest benefits. It does have the least top speed gearing, so it has a 30-tooth chainring in front and 11-tooth cog in the rear, small cog. So those are basically the pros and cons I see for each of the three bikes. Actually, I'm not sure which one will be the fastest. I guess if I just had to pick one, I would probably lean towards the Beargrease, being that it is the lightest bike and it is the best pedaling bike. It is a race bike after all. I also think that some of the things I pointed out as far as cons, may even things out. So we'll be curious to see how they hold up. All right, I'm going to hit the button and we're going to go for a timed lap in the loop. Now we're on to the out and back climb. All right, there we are. Almost 5.5 miles. gonna start our out and back climb. And we're off. All right, day 2, both segments complete. Unfortunately, bad enough that it was windy, but the wind also shifted. Because if you remember earlier, when I started right here, I was in a dead headwind, and now it's shifted, it's gone. So when I was coming back down this way, I was riding into a headwind. So on the lower third of the route, I had a headwind both times, which is the worst. All right guys, it's several days later. I was able to run all 3 bikes on 3 consecutive days. Unfortunately, the weather was a huge factor. You were already kind of able to get a sense of that based on the footage of me doing the runs. The gearing ended up being a huge factor. So even though the Pugsley was the oldest bike and the second heaviest, the gearing really did come through on that bike. I did go online just for my own curiosity, and I found a website called bikecalc.com. I'll post a link down below. And in that website, you can put your wheel size in, your tire width, your chain ring, and your rear cog size. And you can set an RPM, a cadence. I just left it at the default 90 RPM cadence, which is a pretty good up-tempo cadence and probably something close to what I ride, just as kind of a baseline to compare the gear ratios on the bikes. And as it turns out, you know, it did make a difference. At a 90 RPM cadence, the Salsa, which has the least amount of gearing, the top speed is a 22.7 miles per hour. Again, obviously you can go faster on the bike than that with, you know, descending and momentum and things like that, but purely just looking at the numbers based on gearing, that's what it is. The bike with the second best gearing, which is the ice cream truck, its mechanical top speed based on gearing alone at 90 RPM is 25.4. So again, it did have more capability to carry more speed, drive more speed on the descents and some of the flat sections potentially. And then the bike with the most gearing, the Pugsley, its theoretical mechanical top speed, again at 90 RPM, is 26.7 miles per hour. So this kind of gives you puts a number on the gearing. Like I said, I knew going in which bike had more gearing and all that just by knowing the sizes, but that was just I felt like an interesting way to kind of formulate a number based on that and how much it matters. So and it did prove out to some degree in the results. The bike I ran first, so on September 5th I ran the ice cream truck first. It actually had the best weather conditions. It was the coolest day, had almost no wind, and the air quality was outstanding. It was nice and clear. It did a 20.22 on the loop and a 23.02 on the out and back. So the ice cream truck did benefit from the best weather. It was a cool morning. There was almost no wind, and the air quality was outstanding. And you can kind of see that in the video that it is nice and clear. So it had the best weather conditions and put us some good times. So I'm confident that the ice cream truck's times are a good representation of what that bike's capable of on those loops. The second day I ran the Salsa Beargrease, and it actually had the worst conditions of the three bikes. Again, I'm sure you were able to kind of pick up on that in the GoPro footage, how windy it was. It was very warm, so I did get out there a little later than I would have liked, and it was already very hot. It was about 90 degrees. It still put up the fastest time on the loop though at 19:30. So that definitely shows that the speed is there in that bike. It ended up having the slowest time though on the out and back with the climb. And I think that was for a couple of reasons. One, I think it was because the conditions continued to deteriorate. So it was most windy the longer I rode. It just got worse and worse. So I think the wind was really impacting it. Second, the gearing, it has the least amount of gearing. So I would think that that descent coming down, almost 2 3/4 mile of descending with less gearing probably cost a little time. And believe it or not, I had a headwind going up the climb, but the wind shifted during the descent, so I actually ended up having a headwind towards the end of the descent. So very unusual for that to happen, but it did. So, and again, you can hear that on the GoPro footage. You can see that there's a brutal headwind going out and coming back. So I think I'm gonna rerun this bike and try to get, again, better conditions and see what happens, try to get a better representation. I know this bike can do a lot better. I suspect it could greatly improve on the loop time, which was already the fastest. And I think with minimal wind, the speed of the bike would probably give it a good shot to be the fastest on the out and back. The other thing was the air quality because of the fires in the Pacific Northwest and in Colorado. We had a fire blow up the day I ran the ice cream truck that afternoon. So the next day when I ran the Beargrease, the air quality was just terrible. Pretty interesting results from that bike, not in a good way, but I think I'm going to run it again and see what kind of times I could get with better conditions and see what happens. And then the Pugsley was probably for me the surprise of the bunch. It was a surprise because it's the oldest bike and the least technically advanced. It's not set up tubeless. However, it still performs. So the gearing, I think, was probably a big help. I think the rolling resistance on the tires was another big help. It put up the second fastest time on the loop, and it was only 8 seconds slower than the Beargrease. And the conditions for the Pugsley were pretty good. Like it was cooler, there was minimal wind, the air quality was still poor. I don't think that was a huge factor, but it had decent, it could probably, if it had optimal conditions like the ice cream truck had, it could probably do a little better on both of its times, but I'm comfortable with the results it put down as being a good representation. And then on the out and back, it was the fastest bike, which was kind of a surprise at 22.49 seconds on that. But again, I think that's where the gearing was, because coming down, I was just able to really drive it, and I think the rolling resistance being less at higher speed, there's kind of an exponential benefit there. So I think that's where that really came through. So to me, the big surprise was the Pugsley and how well it did. The ice cream truck performed about how I expected it to, based on the fact that it does have the biggest, most aggressive tires on it. Again, the Beargrease, mixed results. It had the best time on the loop and the worst time on the out and back, but it was clearly impacted by weather. So I think the Beargrease with more gearing and better conditions, it would be insanely fast and probably a huge gap on both these bikes. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I had fun making it. Again, I know it's not as scientific as it could have been. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please drop those down below. I respond to all my comments. If you did enjoy the video and want to see more with all three of these bikes in the future, we got lots more planned for the fall, and then the snow will be falling before you know it. So we're definitely going to be getting up in the mountains and do some snow fat biking real soon. Please subscribe to the channel because there's a lot more to come. And thanks, and have a great day.